All right. I think we're live. So just to introduce, I'm Joseph Crowe of Joseph Crowe Custom Audio, and I have my identical twin brother here.
I don't think it's working.
Trevor Crowe. We're just going to do some sound and video checks just to make sure that everything's working. If you can hear us and see us, let us know in the chat.
It says waiting for Joseph Crowe. Oh, there it goes. It's a little delayed.
There's a delay. All right, so in this live, it's just going to be general audio discussion. I'm going to feature some of the recent projects that we've been working on and some driver modifications and things like that. And I have kind of some new products that I've posted on my site as far as plans and 3D CAD files. And Trevor just recently did his own open baffle project, which is quite unique, and we'll show some pictures of that. So it's quite interesting. We did it on the CNC. So,
and leave your questions in the chat, and I'll be moderating them and reading through them. If you have any questions for Troy to answer in terms of his recent projects, or even anything you've been wondering about doing, or sharing your own DIY projects, that would be great.
Yeah, I do get a ton of emails, and so I try to get through them mostly on the weekends, Fridays, and on the weekends. So if I haven't responded to you, just be patient. I do answer every single email, so it doesn't just go into oblivion and not get answered. So, but this is a great time to just general questions. Thanks, Nick, for the sound check there. That's great. I'm gonna reduce my screen here and just show the latest 2800 speaker. So this is something that we have an order for, and we decided to make an extra pair for audio shows, demoing, and just for extra inventory. And so the customer that ordered the pair chose walnut, and so we decided to make both pair out of walnut. And so we're just kind of right in the middle of the build. It's going to be finished in a few weeks, and so maybe I'll do a with my phone, just going around and showing. I have been posting a fair bit on my social media, just the details and close-ups of the walnut baffle and the enclosure in that, and I'm super excited about this particular project. We have two big projects on the go right now. The first one being this 2800 speaker. My wife calls it the Minion speaker. And then we have a pair of Nighthawks that are being built concurrently, and so the shop's been quite busy. Another update too is that we hired a second woodworker, fine woodworker, Emerson, and hopefully I'll be able to introduce him in a future video. But it's just been really exciting. He is extremely skilled, and the first thing that he said was that we needed to upgrade our woodworking equipment. And so we ended up taking the utility trailer to Toronto and basically loading it up with a new table saw, a new thickness planer, and then a new dust collection system. And so the big thing, I think, is the table saw. It's just incredible as far as the rigidity and the stability of the workpiece as you move through. And so the first kind of project that we've been doing are the 2800 speakers, and so it's just been really neat to see the fruits of all that investment coming out and the precision that we're seeing in the product. So yeah, we've just been, as we've been going, we've been making very small changes to the 2800 speaker. And so one of the big changes that we did was, instead of using Baltic birch plywood, we decided to go with very thick, solid, kiln-dried hardwood for the entire enclosure. And so we went with 34 millimeter wall on the entire cabinet, and so that's about 1 3/8 inches thick. So if I hide this here, you can see just kind of the wall thickness. And if you saw the videos on the social media, you kind of could tell what was going on there. And so that's in the rear panel, and then that's also 34 millimeter, and then the front baffle is quite a bit thicker. As you can see, it's 2 inches thick at the thinnest area there. So going with full hardwood actually allowed us to machine the port flares right into the back, which
cool.
I thought was pretty neat to be able to do. And then we're just left with some additional pieces that get screwed on into the inside to continue that flare, so that there's a flare on the inside of the cabinet as well.
You're not doing bracing either because of the thickness. The rigidity is already there in the...
Yeah, the issue with the plywood was that I was going to have to use bracing, and so it just made it a lot more complicated in terms of assembly and accessibility into the drivers, and that I just didn't feel right about it. I didn't have a good feeling about it, and so I just decided to kind of bite the bullet and just go full hardwood.
How many speakers are solid hardwood?
Yeah, well, we had to be careful with thermal, or not thermal, but just humidity. So the speaker is sealed with a hard wax, and then it's constructed in a way that does allow for expansion and contraction of the cabinet. And so we're using special screws, Teflon washers, and Emerson, the woodworker there, he's very familiar with
How wood behaves.
Yeah,
It's a
and
live thing.
what direction it's going to, like we went into every little detail as far as like the screws on the back cover being in the middle, so that these screws are tight, and then it's allowed to.
That's like the datum.
It's like, yeah, and then it moves up and down, and so, and then the other thing is that we have an O-ring groove on it, so we're actually using machine O-rings to seal the front and the back. So
Very cool. Next, you'll just be doing solid aluminum.
there's a question in the chat,
Yeah.
but we can answer this. So not really a DIY question. This is from Sunny. But as dealers approach you guys on becoming mainstream, I've been approached numerous times by dealers. It's about once a month actually, where somebody will reach out to me and ask for inventory. And so it's a challenging, difficult conversation, because from the beginning I've always been very kind of resolute that it's a direct sales model only, and that if you avoid distribution and avoid dealer markup, then you can offer a much stronger value proposition. And that's why I'm able to do the custom work, is we don't have to, making it out. That's why you don't see solid hardwood speakers through dealers, is because it's just not viable in the market, right? So I do feel like it gives a competitive edge in that sense, being able to put that value into the speaker. Now, it's the main challenge is that you can't offer brick and mortar spaces for people to audition. So the Minion speaker is a perfect size speaker to take to audio shows, and I really do want to get to an audio show. I'm thinking with this extra pair of the 2800 being available, I may do the Montreal Audio Fest. And so I did contact them this morning, and they still have some closed rooms available. So we're kind of trying to decide if it's going to be worth the cost, and that considering that we already have orders. And so we're
careful
not
what you wish for, as they say, right?
Yeah, I don't know if I've brought this up before. Because I'm not like a large scale manufacturer, I can't scale, and I don't want to be a large producer. I just want to stay as a small business. And so it doesn't really make sense even to go to shows, because if you get like 10 orders, you're just going to upset your customers, because your lead time is going to be so long. And so it's interesting, when you go to shows, I think most people would assume that the best that's available are at the audio shows, right? You want to see the best of the best, go to the Expona. But with businesses like me, and there's quite a few actually, like especially in Europe, they're custom kind of boutique builders. It doesn't really make sense for them to go to the shows, but they may actually be the best, right? And so the only really way for them to know that, for customers to know that, is through kind of maybe word of mouth and through customer testimonials, and partially, with the objective test data showing the measurements, and kind of hoping that reveals a bit of what people are going to should expect when.
I don't know if anyone has been to audio shows, but our experience has been so hit and miss at the shows, depending on how the room has been set up or treated, or what the noise floor is in the room. And at the end of the show, our ears are ringing from
fatigue, listener fatigue.
Yeah, and an interesting thing, like when I built my open baffle speakers, I considered it a challenge how to lower the noise floor in the room so low that I could listen to it as quietly as possible. And sometimes it seemed like it was more enjoyable the more quiet I listened to the music. And that's kind of at an audio show, that's the opposite. It's like a loudness war.
Yeah, they get the signal to noise ratio up high enough that you can tell. I'm watching some recent videos on YouTube about the frustration that people have, with people talking during the audition, and it depends on the room obviously and how well it's curated, but yeah. So thanks, Sonny, for that question. So I have worked with dealers to develop their own kind of house brand of speaker in the past, and that's something that I did earlier in my business, where they wanted to have their own lineup that's an in-house brand. And so company in Texas, or a dealer in Texas, was quite successful in setting up, used SuperVox drivers, and I did the crossover, and actually it was a really nice little stand mount speaker. So
there's a question about Satori TechStream and Purify aluminum cone drivers.
Yeah, so over a year ago, I tested the 8-inch Purify, and it measures extremely well. And I really struggled to find the interest in, with my customer base, because I'd say 3/4 of my customers are requiring high sensitivity with low power tube amps. And so the Purify, I think, was only around 90 dB at best. And so it just, I found that, that size category, 6.5, 8-inch, it's kind of a saturated market as well. So it doesn't really make sense for me to be in that kind of space. So I'm just carving out a little bit of a niche, going higher sensitivity and focusing on customers that have low power. It seems to be working really well there. So the question there from Kuru, have you tested both the Satori TechStream and a cone driver? So if you look at my blog, there is a recent test on the Satori, I believe it's Satori, it's SB Acoustics 5-inch TechStream mid-range, and that had really great measurements. It was very flat out to around I think 5 or 6K as a result of the diaphragm. So it's a driver that I really want to use in a future project. I can talk about that if it makes sense.
We did talk about that at the last one.
Using, what was it?
It was that driver, and we were putting it in. That was the one you were going to try and use in a compression driver arrangement?
Yeah.
We did talk about that.
So, yeah. The QTS on that 5-inch mid-range is quite low, so it actually is a great for backloaded horn. And so I was very tempted to try a 2-way wide baffle based on the 2314, and I can bring. We're talking in the bottom corner of the screen.
Oh,
here,
yeah.
But
I keep forgetting to tell Troy to make it full screen.
Do full screen here, but I say that just as I'm wanting to switch back to if you're familiar.
Go back into back and forth.
Yeah. So let me just bring it up, break it off, and put it in my.
This is an exciting project, isn't it? Is it going to show up okay on your screen?
Yeah. So we're kind of all over the map, and sorry about this. He asked about the TechStream. Yes, the TechStream is a very interesting material in general. Every TechStream driver that I've heard has had an edge in terms of its performance and wider bandwidth. And so it's an exciting kind of area. And so what I was thinking with the 5-inch tech stream was using
a two-way of this.
Yeah, using
but
it.
A lot of people haven't seen this, and
So the news on this is that this is now available as a plan on my site for DIY if you want to construct.
and scroll down and show the inside path. Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is exciting for me because, well, number one, I've heard it and it sounds phenomenal. I think it's a combination of the really wide baffle and then the bass comes out the bottom and it propagates both out the front and the back of the speaker. So the mouth is actually, the prob is actually quite large. And the problem with a lot of the Fostex design plans or backloaded horn plans from these size drivers is that the mouth really isn't that big, and it's a narrow baffle, so you run into other issues as well with the narrow baffle.
Yeah.
And I've built many backloaded Fostex designs, and I built the Frugal horns probably 10 or 15 years ago, and so I have a reference as to I'm astonished at how much bass can come out of this enclosure.
Yeah.
Just with the size of it. So continue.
Yeah. No, I remember you were actually the first one to do a backloaded horn with the 6.5-inch Fostex. This is like 10,
That would
12
have been
years ago.
ENS driver. It was
Yeah.
like the special edition.
And I remember when I first heard it, I thought that sounds like 12-inch subs, and that I'm always kind of correlated that a backloaded horn makes the speaker sound like twice the size, basically. But on the topic of wide baffle, there's so many different, my mind is going in all different spaces. There's been a blog post that's coming up, and I'm excited about it because I had done a test on a Bema 5-inch, and I actually have it right here. So this was a driver. It's a very affordable little 5-inch Bema, and it's a 5MP60N cast aluminum frame, kind of nice looking, and it almost looks like a Fostex with like the square frame. So I bought it just, wanting to try it out. Unfortunately, it does not measure very well. There's something going on. There's a surround resonance kind of right around 1K, and normally you can deal with the surround resonance, but it just did something to the response which made it very unusable. And so I didn't even publish the data on this. And that kind of leads to the argument, well, should I have published? That's a whole other discussion. But one thing I discovered is that I had this mounted, and I had made a custom enclosure, and I think I have it here, yeah. So because I was planning on doing a little project, this is the enclosure that I had it mounted in. And so I was planning on doing like a little stand mount, with a tweeter on top and make a little cool little project. But I had to abandon it. When you measure the response of it in this, it's just like horridly up and down, not counting the surround resonance. It was more like below 1K. It was just really bad. And so when I was doing the testing, I put wood blocks, like the 2-inch thick hardwood, and just kind of extended it out just along the side, and the response got significantly better. And so then I put one on top, and it got even better, and built it out like as a baffle that was maybe like 18 inches wide, and the response was like significantly better. And I thought, man, that's an amazing, that would make a great blog post on the effects of just simply making the baffle that little bit wider. So that's something I'm going to show in the future. But anyways,
so that brought you to this design.
Yeah, but not using the TechStream driver. And for those that want to know, it's the MR13TX4 there. So, and it's probably some glare, but she's covered in sawdust here. So it's just a beautiful driver. I mean, the TechStream looks really cool, and then it's really open in the design there. You can see the voice coil, and that. So just, you know, playing just the driver and listening to it, and you can tell that it has great clarity. When I did the blog post on this, I directly compared it to the lower series, the Paper Cone SB acoustics, and this definitely has lower distortion. So there is a, you know, a justification to the premium when it comes to that. But
so the design rationale with this backloaded horn was, how do you design a wider baffle backloaded horn that's going to be relatively reasonable in size to fit in most listening environments?
Yeah. There was a question in the chat about the super tweeter. Was there a way to integrate the super tweeter to the cabinet? So yeah, definitely. There's a way with just reconfiguring the passageways there to allow for a tweeter to be put in there. And I feel like the crossover point would probably be around 2.5 to 3 kilohertz. And with the key being that there's like perfect time alignment with the waveguide. And the waveguide would be designed so that it's actually more just providing that time alignment and close driver spacing for, you know, hopefully you can get away with like a first order crossover on it and that. So,
yeah. So this is available on your website now as plans?
Yeah. So it's based on using the FE106NS, you can see there. And so it's probably the best sounding Fostex full range, better than the Sigma series. And I have the NV here, which you have the phone sitting on. The NV is pretty awful, unfortunately. The NV,
is?
Yeah. Oh. Yeah.
So don't buy this one.
Don't buy the NV series, even though they're relatively, you know, affordable. Look at the box.
And the 106 is different in what way?
The 106 has the cast aluminum frame to it.
Oh,
so you can
okay.
see here. I don't know if it's going to focus.
Yeah.
So this is the FE103 NV2. So it's a 4-inch size. So this one, yeah, they're just, you know, the mid-range is shouty and the treble doesn't have much clarity. The NV or the NS there has the whizzer cone, which I think is
okay.
the
Okay, I know which one.
yeah, and then the pleated surround. So it's quite a departure from what Fostex normally offers. So that's why I actually bought it in the first place. I was very curious. You know, putting a whizzer cone on a 4-inch seems a little bit odd, but you would never know it had a whizzer cone. It just sounds pretty good. So anyways, I didn't mean to focus too much on this.
Yeah. And the directivity's a lot better with a smaller driver as well, right? So it's not as beamy as, like, say, an 8-inch or something like that. And this design is cool because you could do like side panels on it with maybe like a colored side panel, but then a wood grain on the face, and make it look very contemporary. And I think it would fit in some spaces really well. And when you're not using it, you can push it right up against the wall and then pull it out if you are doing some late night listening. But yeah, highly recommend this plan. And for the price, $80 US, and then the cost of the drivers, you're with a very, I don't know of anything that would be as enjoyable for that cost. So fun factor. And I sent my prototypes to a customer just so he had some speakers in the interim while his ones that he had ordered were coming in, and he didn't want to send them back. And he ended up buying my prototypes, and so I actually don't have them. So as far as the tweeter for this, and I don't know if there's any other questions in the chat. I don't think so.
So the tweeters, I really wanted to experiment, kind of go back to ribbon tweeters and a waveguide. I get a lot of emails, a lot of questions about waveguides and pure ribbon. And it's an interesting sound. It's unique. I can tell ribbon as soon as I hear it, right? Like it's got like this purity to it and this a level of detail that, you know, I find really enjoyable. Now there are obviously limitations that you have to kind of contend with. One being that I've never found a ribbon that likes to be crossed low, they you know, the intermodulation distortion sets in pretty fast. And so with this design that we're talking about, which is just purely conceptual at this point, based on this 2314.
So we're talking about a two-way of this design.
Yeah, yeah. And so having a crossover point at 3 kilohertz actually, you know, I think a ribbon tweeter would do quite well there and not being too stressed. And so you could go with like what I call like a small format ribbon. And so there's quite a few options there. And then it always helps, I find, with putting it in a waveguide. And unfortunately, a lot of the waveguides that come with ribbon tweeters are poorly implemented. So
I've told Troy 3 times he needs to make a bigger version of this. So in the future, there needs to be a 6.5-inch version and then an 8-inch. And I think an 8-inch full range version of this with, say, I don't know, a 14-inch wide baffle.
yeah.
I tell us in the comments if you want Troy to design that for the website
Yeah.
to download.
Yeah, I have a new horn design software that I purchased back at Christmas, and geez, I can't even remember the name of it. It's a German software, and so actually, let me just see if I have it here. What it's actually called?
You know the icon more than anything. Is it Vituitex?
No,
Oh,
it's
oh.
it's awful.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Moving on.
Anyways, I'll put it in the.
But you were saying it's far more accurate than what horn
Well,
rest was simulating?
it's-
or-
It actually, what I've found with the backloaded horns is that you do need to damp both the throat and the mouth. And so we did that with the 2095 speakers, as there needed to be very careful foam placement in the mouth, or sorry, in the throat of the horn. And for those that don't know, the 2095 is a 15-inch backloaded horn. And so the new software that I've been using for horn design, it actually allows you to apply a dampening factor at both locations, as well as in the rear chamber. And so I was able to simulate previous projects that I had done where I had applied foam in those strategic locations, and it confirmed that yes, it does match with the actual measurements that I was getting. And so with this particular project, one kind of advancement that I want to make is intentionally design areas where you can place foam in the throat and not have it like restrict it too much, right? It actually needs to be similar to a transmission line where you're damping that path. And so there then becomes a huge amount of overlap in design concepts between transmission line and backloaded horn, and where the lines are so blurred that you could almost call this a transmission line. And in terms of marketing, it's like, well, would it be better if I just called this a transmission line? Because there really isn't much difference. It operates on the quarter wave principle, and you know, as far as the low frequency cutoff and all of that. So so I know there's a huge amount of interest in transmission lines in general, and so you know, and I don't think people realize how much kind of overlap there is between concepts.
Yeah.
And
these are
you know,
called backloaded horns, but in all intents purposes, they
Yeah.
are quarter wave length designs.
So the software will allow me to, you know, implement that in the simulation stage. So that's something that I think I'm excited about. So
Cool. So moving on, you've got a couple other things you wanted to share.
okay, let me just bring up the chat here again, wherever it is.
Is it VTL Redux, the software?
I wish I had.
Oh, have you tried Accuton ceramic drivers? That's something that we're interested in getting.
Yeah, Yeah, if Accuton, if you're listening, send us some drivers.
Send us a sample pair, and we promise to give them back.
I promise not to break them.
That's true. I've seen many images of broken Accuton drivers from kids.
So Matasound sells them, and they sell to OEs only. They don't sell to for personal use, which is like, oh, interesting. I could
leverage that.
But the cost is just
They
staggeringly.
are very pricey, but I'm interested in their diamond tweeters.
Yeah.
I think that I've listened, going back to audio shows, I've listened to diamond tweeters, and you're maybe more of a fan of the ribbon stuff, but maybe we're identical twins, so we should have the same ears, but I do like the sound of diamond tweeters. So integrated properly into a design.
Yeah.
So yeah, we are interested in Accuton, and I think I'm saying we, but I'm going to say Troy's going to get them here, and I'm going to listen to them once he gets them.
Yeah, they have a lot of interesting. Some of them are like dome mid-range drivers, where it's like, oh, could you put that in a horn, or even just like a shallow waveguide, right? So certainly, they do post measurements as well, and they look extremely good. So that's considered MEH design. Have I considered MEH design from Thustad? So I think we talked about this in the last live about the limitations of co-entrant and as far as coverage. So I don't want to cover it again. So just there are very specific limitations. Yes, I've done co-entrant designs and they've been successful, but they don't offer wide coverage in the treble unless you're going with conical. So or constant activity. Okay, so just looking at the chat here. Active crossovers. So we talked about that.
We've talked about active. My experience is if you're doing budget active crossovers like a mini HD 2x4, I think the sound quality is very detrimental compared to just a quality passive crossover.
I haven't, it's been like 10 years. I haven't heard the Mini DSP Studio series, the SH series. And, even like on ASR, the published test data is like light years better than what the original Mini DSP used to be, which had incredibly high noise floor. So I can't really comment on...
I'm only saying it from the context of don't judge active just by listening to like a Behringer active pro audio, like a budget active. You have to, don't think you're going to save a lot of money in that area by going active versus passive in that sense. You still have to spend a little bit of money.
So generally speaking, when a customer emails or asks that question, my response is, well, if you're going with the turnkey plans that are on my site, definitely build the passive crossover first and just listen to that and then experiment with active to see if you can beat it, because it's incredibly challenging to try to beat a good passive. And so if you can, great, congratulations. But there's just so many challenges. So
And that said, the Hypex active crossovers are very good in that sense. So it just depends. That's the answer. It depends.
Now, saying that, and I don't remember if I mentioned this, but the Nighthawks are active on the base. And so it's 1,400 watts per side, which is very hard to do in a fully passive setup. Like you're talking, like very, very costly inductors that you can't even buy. They'd have to be custom made from somewhere, from like 10 gauge wire or something. So it's just not. So yeah, there are specific cases where active really pays dividends in terms of, and then you do the room correction in that. So so that's what we're doing with the latest Nighthawks. It's 1,400 per side. It's got two Hypex FA 501s per side. And so with a 2 ohm load on it to produce 750 watts per plate amp. So
giving away your trade secrets.
Well, it's something that I'm excited about, and it's going to be incredible to actually hear that level of bass,
that level of power.
So there was a question, or it wasn't really a question, but DVS said, I printed the 65 CDN open back cups, and I feel that they made a significant improvement to the sound. So thanks for that. Yeah, so it's a very audible improvement.
Do you have a picture of what we're talking about? Just, I know some people aren't familiar with the numbers.
Yeah. Neither am I after, it pops right
There
up.
you
So,
go.
yeah.
Yeah, so people can see that. This is what we're talking about.
Yeah, so Mark, this is like 3 years ago, Mark from SB Acoustics, he was very confident in this specific model and said, can I please send these to you? And this was my first encounter with Mark, and he the 65 CDNT is now one of the most popular compression drivers, not just with us, but just in general. It's being talked about all the time on DIY audio, and so we use it on a number of products. And so what we've done is enlarge the rear chamber volume, and so it's available as a 3D CAD file on the site for 3D printing. And so just general information, there's two versions, one that's open back with the hole and then a closed back. So you only use the closed back if you're using the compression driver inside the base enclosure and it needs to seal off from the air pressure. But otherwise the open back, because it actually provides like the perfect amount of rear radiation off the front wall, just providing a little bit more ambience. And that's not why the driver sounds better, but it's just kind of like an added benefit. And so what it does is it lowers the fundamental resonance of the diaphragm from like 370 hertz down to like 290. It might even be more of a gap, I can't quite remember, but we use the rear cover when we're using it on the ES600 biradial, for example, because it allows loading right down to 600 hertz.
And what's the benefit of that for the newbies?
So my personal rule of thumb is that the FS of the driver, which is the natural resonance of the diaphragm, needs to be well below the operating bandwidth of
the loading of the horn? Operating bandwidth? Okay.
Just it needs to be lowered quite a bit outside of the intended frequency bandwidth that you want to operate. So if you want to have your crossover point at 600 hertz, then like ideally you'd want to have the FS an octave lower at like 300 hertz.
Okay.
And if you look at like the DATs, when you measure the impedance with the DAT speaker tester, it also shows the phase response at the top of the graph. And so you can see that as you drive that FS lower, the phase response gets flatter and flatter. And so I really do, and this is just conjecture on my part, but I do feel like if you're concerned about soundstage depth, having a flat phase response is one of the factors in obtaining that.
Is there an added benefit of just wider bandwidth because you're maintaining the high cutoff point?
Yeah.
And you're lowering the low.
Yeah, there's no
downside.
There's no drawback in terms of home audio, right? Where you're listening at normal SPL, even high SPL is the reason the rear chamber is so small on these compression drivers is because they want to maximize the power handling of the compression driver. And so they try to push that into smaller and smaller as far as what they can get away with for pro sound, live sound reinforcement applications. And so we're left kind of modifying compression drivers to suit home audio applications and getting a wider bandwidth out of it. So
yeah. And if you need 100-watt power handling on your compression driver in your living room, then you have other problems.
Your hearing aids might not be turned up. So as far as active question, I was thinking more like the Danville signal system. So I am not actually familiar with that. Sorry. If that's like a high-end home audio solution, I know there's a number of them out there, and by all means, definitely consider that. I would say that the potential is there, that if it's implemented correctly, that it can yield amazing results. So, love your channel, by the way. Thanks, Eddie. DVS is saying that the the rear cover vastly improved the off-axis listening. Yeah, with the opening off the back, certainly. I'd say too, with the ES by radials, if you're listening closer, it's nice to have a little bit of a spaciousness off the back wave, which is helpful. So, and if you're doing the 1815 plan or the 1786, so the 1786 plan here, it requires the rear chamber. So just be aware of that those designs do require that change to the compression driver. So.
Okay, there were some other things on your list for.
Do you think the DCM 50 could run without a rear baffle? Like, so, yeah, I definitely do. That's actually in the queue for testing. So for those that aren't aware, the DCM 50, so this is the DCM 50, and it's actually quite popular. Since I've started using it, there's quite a few enthusiasts that are also using it, and they've been using it for a long while. So, so this driver is actually quite unique, and I can show you that.
Do you have anything else to show?
Just on the computer with the SolidWorks.
Right, because you have it in CAD as part of your design.
Yeah, so we can touch on that now, actually. So. I'll bring this up into my upper screen. So this is the SolidWorks 3D CAD model that I created, and it's kind of reverse engineered from the physical compression driver. And so I've sectioned through, you have the front part of the DCM 50, and then I 3D printed a larger rear chamber.
So you've kept this part here, but you've taken off the fins on the back.
Yeah. So the rear of the driver has been replaced
and
with
this,
a 3D printed.
Is this part staying? Is that what that is? Okay.
Yeah. So this is it doesn't quite show it properly, but anyways, this is the motor, and it's actually held on with 3 screws from inside, and it can come right off. So it disassembles, and the driver basically disassembles into 4 pieces. You have the motor, the diaphragm, and then the front and back casting.
So you can run it open back, you're saying?
Yeah. So you could 3D print.
Side of the
you
cone?
could just cut holes, or reprint this again with perforation.
Speed holes?
Speed holes.
Simpsons reference.
And just run it open back. So yeah, so this is actually behind us. You can see there, that's what's mounted right now, is the 3D printed.
Can they see that okay?
Yeah. So it's printed, and I printed it on my small printer there with really high res settings. And so it worked the first try, being able to assemble it, and everything still kept in perfect alignment as far as the voice coil and the motor. And I made sure that everything, like, so for example, here is the existing motor, and so it's got, pretty tight, basically, I think it's like less than 0.5 millimeter clearance that the 3D printer is able to do that. If you print it properly, right? Like,
oh, I see. Your 3D printed part is holding the motor structure.
Yeah.
So to do open back, I get what you're saying. You still have to have this.
Yeah.
But you can.
Yeah. So you can see here, these are the existing bolts that hold the motor on, and then this is the part that I printed.
Okay.
So I can change. Well, the light gray is printed. I can change the color, so you can see just kind of what.
I think people get it. Oh, I see. That's the 3D printed part.
Yeah. So you can actually see.
Okay. So
Now-
why did you make a new back cover?
So, following the success of the 65 CDNT, I wanted to see what could be done with the DCM 50 by enlarging the rear volume. And so, the only way to get larger volume is to go right out into this donut shape and have this cavity inside here provide that extra internal volume. And so, it dropped the FS of the driver. I don't quite remember the exact numbers, but it was from like 350 hertz down to like 270. You know, so now it can be effectively used on the ES290 horn, which is mounted. You know, that's what that is behind us.
Okay.
So along with that, and then experimenting with some coating, like doping the paper, because the paper is not doped or treated in any way. It's just, you know, again, pro sound. They're trying to maximize sensitivity, and so to dope it would, you know, drop a few dB off the sensitivity. But
you
so
would lower the FS because it's a little bit heavier.
yeah, so actually I have treated the cone that's in it twice. I started with a really light treatment, and then measured it, and then I saw some very, very subtle improvements with like the frequency response smoothness, and didn't see any drop in sensitivity. And so I just basically doped it 3 times the amount that I had done before and listened to it, and it's significantly better. Just immediately noticeable that male vocals are just like, wow, like extremely expressive. So yeah, that's there's probably 4 more changes that I'm going to be making to this. So
Wow. It's a hot rodded compression driver.
yeah.
Was there any breakup nodes that changed with the doping?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there is a peak kind of at 10K, and that was even with a light, moderate amount of doping, it dropped that peak down quite a bit. So
Cool.
So yeah, the question here in the chat is, can you cross it lower? And absolutely, that's the whole point. This DCM 50 is used on the 2800 speaker that we're currently building. It has the ES450 biradial, so a 450 hertz cutoff. But I want to use this on a much bigger horn, and so that's why we're looking at making these changes, is to, you know, to make it suitable for home audio and very, very low crossover points. So,
And this driver sounds amazing out of the box, but
yeah,
you know.
yeah, I should mention that too. We're not trying to fix any problems.
it's just
it's
building
already
on something that's already good. It's like, man, this thing has potential. So cool.
Yeah, and then there's some other changes that are quite significant that I really don't want to divulge.
Troy is so desperate to tell you guys
Yeah,
what he's doing,
but I can't, because it's just,
He'll regret telling you.
yeah, but it'll be included in the 2800 speaker as like a turnkey build. So yeah, that's kind of like that line where it's, I'll offer the plans for the rear chamber and that, but beyond, you know, some other changes that I'm looking at, it's you know,
Yeah.
so yeah.
I think people can understand that. You put so much research and time into developing this stuff, and you already give so much of it away.
Yeah.
So, okay, next.
All right. Hell yeah, make it better. Thanks, Mr. Smiley. Oh, so did you use a 3D scanner to do this model? No. So it's really just these, right? Plastic digital calipers, which actually are quite accurate. And just the plastic, because it's not going to damage the surfaces, and then also with the magnetic forces there, you're not going to be like,
Very frustrating having neomagnets and trying to measure them
yeah.
with the metal measuring device. So
Yeah, so digital calipers, just to kind of reverse engineer. Now, Bennett did send me the model for the DCM 50, but you can tell they've like hollowed out the phase plug because they don't want to disclose that.
that's funny.
And then the diaphragm itself was not in the model, and so I had to actually just physically measure the existing diaphragm. And then when you're measuring it, you're like, oh yeah, that's nominally 70 millimeter right? And then,
Yeah, it's all
so a lot of it
dimensions.
is nominal dimensions. So when you do bring it in, it just lines up perfectly with the, you know, the manufacturer's CAD model. So I'm not sure how much they would appreciate me, you know, doing all of this, but
Hey, if
maybe-
you're modding their products and more people buy it, I can't see them being upset.
it'd be really cool for BNC to come out with like a home audio specific compression driver, but the market would be very small for that. But maybe a text stream version, you know,
Yeah.
allow it to actually go out to like 15K. Thanks, Laura. My assistant.
So, yeah, you've got a list of things there to talk about.
Okay.
I mean, your projects.
Okay.
I don't think there's anything in the chat right now.
Yeah, just more questions about text stream. So we do have a couple new 3D CAD models on the site that I wanted to show. So this was a project from about a year ago, and I had a customer request, you know, me to send them the files, and so I decided to just offer it on my site, which is sometimes easier than all the work of sending the files. Just put it up on my site. So this was a it's a two-piece waveguide for a CS. Is it CS or ScanSpeak? CS Prestige dome tweeter. And so it's a really good dome tweeter in its own right. And so by carefully designing the waveguide for it, you can see here how you know close we're trying to follow the surround in that. And so the main thing with this is that it's more of like an experimenter's 3D CAD file. The customer that requested these files wanted them in step format so that he could bring them into his own, I think it was maybe Fusion or Rhino, to be able to make changes to to make changes to the CAD file before printing. And so a lot of times you have existing tweeters, you know, 27mm dome, and you want to, you know, just play around and experiment yourself with different kind of throat shapes and that. And so I include the step files as well as the STL files so that you can do that. And the two-piece assembly actually makes it useful in that way. And it also makes it so that you can print it with really high resolution in the throat, just the way that it's oriented in the printer. So
that you would just go back to that drawing, so that the bed of the printer would be on that flat face.
this would be the bed of the printer.
Okay.
And then the same for
That,
here would be
same
on
for
the
that.
opposite side.
Right.
So something that I've learned. So it's a 3D CAD file, and so it loads to 1 kilohertz, and typically you would probably come in at like a 2 kilohertz crossover point with this, because this particular dome tweeter, you know, you can't cross lower than 2 kilohertz, but it does add like really good pattern control below that, so that if you want to mate it up to like a 6.5 or an 8-inch woofer, it'll have like perfect polar, you know,
matched polar response.
yeah. So you can use like a shallower slope, you know, as a result. So that's that guy. And then do we want to talk about your open baffles that you had worked on?
Yeah.
Sure. So
You got it. Oh yeah. Yeah, we were 30 seconds before going live, and I had to quickly email Troy. This was a weekend project 2 weekends ago.
yeah.
And I was actually on a cruise and had got some money off selling some N64 video games, and on a whim I bought these Pioneer PAX 25F drivers off eBay, and they showed up at my door when I got home, and I had been looking at different enclosures and different boxes, and there wasn't a lot of info on the parameters of the drivers. This is pre-fill small parameters, right? So ended up doing an open baffle. So I went to a local lumber yard in the middle of winter. I don't know what that is. And
Did you post
got
other-
these slabs.
Did you post other pictures, or
Yeah,
it's just the
there's,
video?
That's strange. Yeah,
Is it
there's
just
other
the video?
photos.
Just
No,
the
there is other photos, but
Okay.
that's okay. You can just run it on a loop. So yeah, we ran it on Troy's CNC to get this tapered opening for the cutout, and I kept the live edge look, and then I welded up the frames. I still have a little bit of work to do. I'm going to 3D print the caps for the end of the wood and some clips for the back, and seal it up a little bit better. But yeah, really happy with the result. It's got that El Nico vintage sound. It's actually a very, very good sounding driver. Surprisingly good.
Yeah, yeah, a little bit rolled off in the highs, but otherwise great mid-range clarity, and actually decent bass from just that, right? Like
Yeah.
acceptable. It wasn't
Yeah.
shrill or thin or anything like that. So,
Yeah.
but you said it has very limited overall output capability.
Yeah, it's
Like
only a
low.
15 watt driver, although it claims 100 dB sensitivity. I don't know how true that is, but it's 16 ohm as well. So I was a little bit picky on the tube amper. I ended up finding my 20 watt Sansui AU666 or 665, 20 watt 1960s vintage Sansui integrated, worked really well with these. So, but yeah, it was a fun little project, and it kind of got the DIY bug out of me. So I had been looking at different designs all since the holidays. So yeah.
Yeah, and I got to try out my new ball nose cutter, 1.5" ball nose.
Yeah, it did it in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
I would have been a whole week on a traditional router trying to get that cut. So through 1.5" solid maple.
Yeah, I pushed it to the max. I wanted to see what it could do.
Yeah.
Somebody
And then-
asked about if this is a horn loaded, so
I'm not
we
sure.
we weren't really intending on it being a horn. It's more of just the way
Yeah,
that the driver
It's an
mounts.
interesting driver because you can only mount it from the back. There's no way to mount it from the front. So and then it's an 1.5" thick wood, so we had to do something.
Yeah.
We didn't want a hollow cylindrical.
Yeah, we
2
didn't want
inches
like a
thick.
cavity resonance
Yeah.
behind the driver. So
Yeah.
we went with that, and it probably loads a little bit, but
Yeah.
so if you're interested in some measurements on that, let me know in the comments, and we can throw it on the rotary table. And
Yeah.
the open baffles are actually hard to measure because you have to contend with the rear wave radiation interfering with the front. So you have to have a way of blocking and closing the back of the driver to get the measurements. But that's a little bit of a caution if you're doing measurements of your speakers, is always account for the rear wave. Even the rear cover for the 65 CDNT, like that little bit of output
Oh yeah.
out of that can create comb filtering. Now the question is, well, wouldn't you hear that? No, absolutely not. That's not how we perceive sound, so there's no concern there. So anything else in the chat? I don't think so. I'm just gonna go see what my list has for. There are another cabinet plan there, and I'll bring it up here. So the JBL 2226 is a, widely recognized excellent bass driver. And so I purchased a pair off eBay and did some testing, and I really liked the overall sound. It's comparable to the Bima. Do you need anything? Okay. Do you want to have a seat? Do you want me to grab you a chair? Grab a chair. So I was commissioned to do a design for this driver, and so it's this particular driver is available in 4, 8, and 16 ohm, and so the plans don't change based on that, but it is a flexible driver. And so you can see here it's tuned to 38 hertz. It's 105 liter internal volume, and the overall sensitivity is 96.3. It does have a rising response, so at the 300 hertz, it's close to 100 dB sensitivity. So there would need typically be some sort of baffle step compensation required for this particular driver. Now, I did do distortion measurements on this driver, and you can see here just how great it is, especially once you get past 100 hertz there. We're at 0.1% distortion for the 95 dB test signal. So like really nice performance there. So that's the, you know, the classic JBL underhung, you know, so. So I do have a design commission in the queue for a version of this cabinet, but as a dual 15. And so it's going to be up on my site soon, and it's an Onken as well, with the ports along the sides as well. And so same tuning, same volume, just as a dual 15. And so there's a bit of a space at the bottom. So the idea with this cabinet design, I was trying to bring it up before the live, with the dual 15, is that you can actually use like the ES290 biradial on top of it, and then have a bass reflex Onken dual 15 below it. So that's a really cool plan. If you have the space, you know,
you can run it sideways.
yeah,
Okay.
it's meant for
Like the
horizontal.
Onken W, if anyone are familiar with that, it'd be similar to that.
Yeah,
That's
and then the nice thing is you can get the drivers. They're still commercially available from Parts Express. You can also buy them from eBay. Either, you know, get a recone kit for them. So that's generally what people do, is they buy used or really good condition drivers. And so you can get the 16 ohm version and wire them in parallel. So that's also an option as well, which is nice. So yeah, so if you have any questions about that, just I'll have that up on my site soon.
There was a question about how the Bima driver would sound in that.
The thing with the Bima is it's only available in an 8 ohm, so you would have to figure out how you're going to wire them.
And even for this design?
So basically drop in.
Okay.
Like you can use either one interchangeably. I did directly compare when I was doing the distortion measurements. I was swapping the driver in and out and comparing it against the Bima. The JBL does have lower distortion through this, you know, above 100 hertz compared to the Bima. So it is, you know, a really good driver. So.
I've heard people say beaming with large diameter woofers at higher frequencies. Do you find that a problem?
It's not so much the beaming. With the 15-inch drivers, you need to be really careful just what the actual driver sounds like in that 300 to 600 hertz range. That's my big objection, is just, you know, what kind of level of clarity are you getting? And so that would be the first kind of thing to make sure. And then also with beaming, well, you really do need to keep the crossover point at the proper location. Like for a 15-inch, there's basically a set crossover point that you're supposed to use, you know, and so it's just a mathematical relationship. So yeah, like obviously, yes, there are beaming to contend with. But generally avoid that region where the woofer starts to become directional. So yeah. I'll just go back here. We're kind of getting to the tail end of what we have here for the live today. If I can find my... So yeah, we touched on the wide baffle backloaded horn. We touched on the Onken there for the JBL, and then the 2009 horn plans that are new. So the only other thing maybe to touch on, if there wasn't other questions, was just what we do have in inventory on the site. And so which I updated that today. If you're on the site, there's a section called inventory. And so we do have extra speakers for the 2087. We have one pair in cherry for the open baffles, and then the 1815 speakers in walnut as well. And so, and like I mentioned earlier in the live stream, we have a demo pair of the 2800 that we're currently working on and then these subwoofers here, so which have been available for a while. So
Okay, there's a super chat question. I have your ES1200 horn. Sounds great down to 1300 hertz. I'm wondering what mid-range size direct radiating driver you would recommend for the ES1200 for a directivity match specifically is the question.
Yeah, you're going to
Thank you for that.
Yep. So it's the ES1200, which
Can I bring that up on the screen?
Yeah, let's actually bring it up.
Or you can bring it up there. I don't know how that screen. So it's a smaller horn.
So we can look at the test data here. This is only out to 60 degrees. I don't think I have a polar map. But generally, the physical width of the horn, you want to match it with, so if it's 222 wide, you're into an 8-inch category. And I would recommend likely the CS 8-inch that we're using on the 1680 speaker and the 2800 speaker uses treated paper 10-inch, but there's also an 8-inch version that I would recommend as well. I would generally try to stick with the CS or the ScanSpeak brand. It's pretty hard to go wrong on that. There's a Discovery series, which is even more affordable. And so definitely want to check those out, and even just experiment with sealed, because we have the 8-inch ScanSpeak drivers here in a 1-foot cube, and it's surprising
How much bass they put out.
yeah, really, really nice, tight bass. And then the other nice thing is if your room is really small, then it allows for you to place the speakers basically right up against the front wall. Or it's not that you have to, but it gives you that option if you're, tight for space. So,
and you have a design. You probably have to go back on your blog posts about the 8-inch Onken, the mini Onken, as a cabinet with that 8-inch driver. With this on top would probably be.
That's actually what this one is here in the picture, is just a version of that.
So what happens when you search mini Onken? I don't know.
I think it's 50 liter.
I don't think you expect the liters.
It's see what we come up with.
It's one of your first projects.
Yeah.
So I'm going in the way back machine on the internet here.
Yeah. So these are in the shipping container. And unfortunately, Fostex discontinued this 8-inch.
Yeah.
And so I do need to find a replacement woofer for this.
If you can find those woofers used, get them. I have a pair of them, the only pair that Troy has, and I don't think I'm giving them back.
Yeah. I had tested the Dayton Audio Reference Series 8-inch woofer. It's an affordable driver available in either paper or aluminum. And directly comparing it against this driver, the 8-inch Fostex, the Fostex blew it away in terms of test data. The measurement, the distortion was almost as low as the 8-inch Purify. So it's unfortunate that they don't carry this woofer anymore. But so I got to find something that will work in this. So
there, the plans are available.
Yeah. So it is my plan to revisit the Autumn series, which is what I started 5 years ago. Autumn series was like a small horn speaker, kind of like a for DIY. And so I need to kind of bring this back, look at some, commercially available woofers and what works in this cabinet. So,
and there is a question now that we're still on Onkens. Is there a software or a way to calculate the design of the Onken? Let me see if I asked that right. With the Onken style slot ports for the tuning.
This one right here.
Okay. Okay. For Onken, the calculation for the port is just the port area. And so just the width and the height and calculating the area. So like in V2X you can just fix the port based on that. I hope I understood the question. There's not really any more science to it than that. I know there's a lot of like mystique surrounding Onken, and like as it's being some, it's just really not like it. The nice thing about the Onkens is that there's structural rigidity to the cabinet. Like it's incredibly rigid by creating almost like that truss effect along the side walls, which not just reinforces the side walls, but it reinforces everything else. And so, and then the base with it forward radiating, I feel like that's, you know, a nice feature for whatever reason. And perhaps maybe the line source of the base, you know, as your like the position, if you had a circular port, the room response, you know, depending on where the port is, whether it's at the bottom or the top or on the back, like that can dramatically alter the in-room response. And so there may be something happening with the line source coming down the front of the cabinet. So.
And you can also tune it. That's probably a taboo thing to say, but you can block one or two of the ports if you're putting in a different driver, or if you want to lower the tuning, where that's sometimes difficult with a traditional ported speaker.
So just to emphasize that part of it, so if you're in V2X you can check this box to fix the area of the port. And so that's gonna, you know, and then you can just fix the tuning frequency as well. And so just calculate in square centimeters what the total area of the ports are. And that's how I do it, and I don't think it needs to be any more complicated than that. So
have you seen the Onken W design with dual LTEC 416s per cabinet? Yes.
you're familiar with that, right?
Yeah.
So another thing that I wanted to maybe ask is, I have the Japanese design books. I'm drawing a blank. Nagaku or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I butchered it.
Yeah.
But the Fostex backloaded horn plans. And so doing like a design study. Lawrence, do you want to?
It's okay.
It's okay. I just don't want them to be a distraction. So.
It's fine.
So doing a design study on like pulling out of the book, you know, a specific plan and looking at the actual horn rasp simulation and talking about the design, and you know they use a specific Fostex driver, and looking at the parameters of that driver and discussing like just the overall design and what you can expect, because the book actually publishes the RTA in-room response.
Right. Yeah, it does.
Right. And so there is some information that we can correlate, you know, to the simulations and talk about why they designed it a certain way. So if is it Nagaoka? I think that's what it is. Nagaoka. I had to order them from Amazon Japan, and it was like $400 for the books.
He's a true fan.
Yeah. I had actually reached out to the family that has that it's like, anyways.
I'd be curious to know the whole, like, Fostex is a huge company, like how on earth they're doing, like there must be a passion project to have some of these products and the history behind it. So that'd be an interesting story at some point.
Yeah.
I think that's it. So
Okay.
You don't have anything else to share?
Nothing else for today, don't think. So definitely some more blog posts coming up with some measurements. It's tough to find time, you know, when you have orders and that, but
Yeah.
it's definitely in the queue. So
Yeah. And I'm going to try to do the 8-inch backloaded horn. That'll be the next one. So,
yeah.
all right.
Okay, well, that's it. So take care and have a great night.